All right, let's move to the story now. The ANC is urging government to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. This was announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa today during his meeting with the Finnish president in Pretoria. He says the decision was taken because of the manner in which the ICC conducts itself on certain matters. President Niinistå's visit seeks to strengthen trade and investment between South Africa and Finland. eNCA senior reporter Aviwe Mtila following that story, joining us now. So, Aviwe, of course, this issue around the ICC is something we're going to get to. It's a very interesting story indeed. Just talk to us about the major focus of discussions today between Finland and South Africa.
It's actually one of those major focuses, Sally, as of course, let's first start with the relations between Finland and South Africa that date back, the diplomatic ties officially being tied in 1949. They've continued even in apartheid South Africa, where Finland actually supported the sanctions against apartheid South Africa in 1987 till 1991, and then re-established those diplomatic ties after the democratic elections in 1994. With that state visit happening in 1997 with that then President of Finland meeting President Nelson Mandela at the time, and the President Nelson Mandela saying that it's now time to show you the democratic South Africa that you helped, in fact, forging those ties and actually helping making possible. Now, Finland President is in the country, Sauli Niinistö, of course. That is some 20 years later, 20 plus, in fact, years later, after that initial meeting with the President. They've had good diplomatic ties and, of course, the trades that have been ongoing between the two countries. But now, Sally, they meet at the time where Finland recently joined NATO, the 31st country that's joined NATO. Remember, Finland is actually situated at the border of Russia. Of course, this happened some 3 weeks ago on the 4th of April. It's actually been making international headlines. Remember that even President Putin suggesting that the reasoning behind that conflict with Ukraine is that, in fact, it's that threat that NATO is increasing its land presence along its borders. So now, of course, NATO has doubled that presence with Finland joining now. Of course, it was one of those key issues in that press briefing that was held at the Union Buildings, the seat of power, with President Niinistö explaining that they can't trust Finland anymore. Remember that historically, they've never actually had any alliances when it comes to any military action. But now they've taken a stance just some 3 weeks ago to join NATO. Of course, that's in the opposition of Russia, strong opposition. A very key issue, given that South Africa is part of the BRICS nation, and of course it also talks to that ICC issue. But I want us to first listen to the Finnish president speak then on their relationship with Russia and why they took that decision on the 4th of April then to join NATO as the 31st country as part of the NATO countries.
I took up also the European situation where the Russian attack to independent Ukraine has shocked common opinion, and for example for Finland and Finns it meant that we could not continue living as a neighbor of Russia with full trust of our security, with full trust of guaranteeing our security just by ourselves. And that is why that opinions in Finland changed very rapidly in the end of 21. Some 20% of people supported NATO in 3 months' time after Russia had demanded that NATO can't enlarge and attacked an independent sovereign country, Ukraine. Finns changed their minds, and 80% of the population was pro-NATO. So I think that this is a very clear, simple and justified explanation what happened.
Yeah, so President Initso essentially saying that the people of Finland were really worried because they too border Russia, as does Ukraine, and they would not want to be in a situation where they don't have the full backing of NATO should Russia ever try and advance. Of course, as we know, Russia has said one of the reasons they invaded Ukraine was because they were concerned that NATO was going to become more friendly with Ukraine. South Africa saying essentially it's neutral in this matter, but we know that a Russian warship was performing military maneuvers off our waters just a few weeks ago. So it's an interesting one, an interesting position that our president is in. Let's take a listen before we chat again, Aviwe, to what our president had to say to Finland's explanation of why they joined NATO.
In my discussions with President Initso, he explained very well and outlined the reasons and the steps that have been taken by Finland to want to join NATO. And it is within Finland's right to decide to join NATO. They hadn't been part of NATO for the longest time, and now they've decided to join NATO. And we respect that and we accept that. And so we can never really question the right of a nation to decide which formation they want to be part of. With regard to our own stance on this whole conflict, we've been very clear right from the beginning that conflicts of whatever nature are best resolved through negotiation. And I've often said that this was a lesson that we were well taught by the father of our democracy, Nelson Mandela, who from the time he was in prison insisted that conflicts, including what was deemed to be a most intractable conflict of apartheid, should best be resolved through negotiation. And he insisted that that should be the case, and he triumphed in that. Upon being released from prison, the negotiations then ensued, and they brought an end to the nightmare of apartheid.
All right, so the president saying that he understands Finland's position. Of course, what we know is that the International Criminal Court has since issued a warrant of arrest against Vladimir Putin, which suggests that every country that's a member of the ICC would be duty-bound to arrest him should he come into their territory. And as we know, Putin has been invited to the BRICS summit. I think that's happening in August. So the ANC now coming out saying, actually, South Africa needs to withdraw from the ICC. Tell me more.
That's the case, Sally. African National Congress, of course, taking that decision that South Africa needs to pull out of the ICC because it has unfair treatment. And in fact, it's something that they've properly discussed, and that treatment of the ICC needs to be looked into. But they say that as South Africa, they need to pull out. That's a decision of the African National Congress. And of course, the president of the ANC is Cyril Ramaphosa. But also today, when asked by the Finnish journalist what they would do as South Africa, he gave the official government stance, suggesting that as the country they still applying their minds on what will happen around the ICC's warrant of arrest against President Putin when he comes to South Africa, and then in due course they'll give the official word in terms of what the government stance is. But he also made it clear and actually acknowledged what the ANC has said, as of course he is the president of the African National Congress. In fact, let's take a listen then at President Cyril Ramaphosa explaining the stance of the ANC around pulling out the ICC.
Yes, the governing party, the African National Congress, has taken that decision that it is prudent that South Africa should pull out of the ICC, largely because of the manner in which the ICC has been seen to be dealing with these types of problems. And there's also been commentary, I believe, from Amnesty International, where there's been a reflection on what many people believe is an unfair treatment. And our view is that we would like this matter of unfair treatment to be properly discussed. But in the meantime, the governing party has decided once again that there should be a pull-out. So that will be a matter that will be taken forward.
Yeah, I suppose if South Africa does withdraw from the ICC, then President Putin can visit this country in August and not fear arrest. Thank you so much for wrapping that up for us, Aviwe Mtila there.